Hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Samantha Lemieux, and I'm a senior associate on NPI EXPAND here at Palladium. Before we get started with today's event, I just want to go over some logistics with everybody. So today we're pleased to provide live captioning for the webinar. We will be speaking in English today, so if you'd like to see captions in another language, please just go through the following steps that you also see on the screen here. So to access the captions in a language other than English, you'll click on the More button at the top of your screen. Next, you'll choose Language and Speech, and then choose the option to turn on live captions. From there, to change the language, you'll select the Settings button near your captions at the bottom of your screen, and then finally you'll select Caption Language and choose your preferred language. Please also note that this webinar is being recorded and that the recording will be shared on the NPI EXPAND website after today's event. And finally, we encourage all attendees to submit questions for today's panelists at any time through the question and answer box, which is found at the top of your screen. Our team will be collecting these questions for the Q&A portion later in today's webinar. So now I'll turn it over to Jeff Barnes, our project director at NPI EXPAND, to kick things off. Over to you, Jeff.
Great, thanks, Samantha. Welcome, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. This is our second in a series of webinars on localization that NPI EXPAND is running this year. This one is called Rigor and Ownership in Local Partner Assessments. As you might imagine, in keeping with the principle that capacity strengthening should be both intentional and evidence-based, NPI EXPAND has used and developed a series of capacity assessments for nearly 90 partner organizations during our 4 years of implementation. What we found is that in implementing different kinds of assessments, we've noticed there's often a balance to be achieved between rigor in terms of scoring the local organizations and their sense of ownership over the assessment. From the perspective of being able to assess organizations against global standards, a more rigorous approach is used for certain kinds of assessments. However, often we see those assessments don't have the same level of buy-in from local organizations. So for the objective of driving the local organizations to plan for self-improvement and really take the results seriously, we've generally preferred facilitated self-assessments. Finding the right balance between these objectives is our central topic for today's webinar. We've also invited one of our colleague organizations, PAC, to join us because they have a long history in developing and promoting assessment tools. And we hope you will benefit from our shared experience in this domain. Just as a reminder, after today's session, we have 6 more webinars. There'll be basically 1 webinar a month between now and July 2024. We hope you'll join us for future webinars. With that, I'll turn things over to our moderator for this morning, Jasper Ondieki, our Capacity Strengthening Director. Jasper?
Thank you, Jeff. Hello, everyone. My name is Jasper Ondieki, and I am the Capacity Development Director for NPI EXPAND. Local capacity strengthening is an integral part of USAID's localization agenda. As a flagship project under the locally led development efforts of USAID, NPI EXPAND has local capacity strengthening as one of its key result areas. Organizational assessments play a critical role in identifying capacity needs of organizations and setting the agenda for capacity strengthening. Today's webinar on local partner assessments is the second in NPI EXPAND's webinar series, focusing on lessons learned in localization. NPI EXPAND is collaborating with PACT to host this webinar. And with that introduction, I now turn it over to Ebele, who will introduce herself and give us a background about organizational assessments. Over to you, Ebele.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone from wherever you're joining us in the world. My name is Ebele Acho, and I work with PACT as a Capacity Development and Innovation VP. This morning, thank you so much for joining us again, and thank you so much to the NPI EXPAND team. I am truly excited to be partnering with them. PACT is very excited to partner with the team, and we have actually partnered from the inception of the program. Next slide, please. And so to start us off this morning, my role is to set the scene. And I just wanted to, as a reminder, share that as PACT, we've been around for more than 50 years, and our work has always been strengthened and situated in the context of making sure that we're offering capacity and leaving capacity behind in every intervention. We work globally across many countries. And so based on all that experience this morning, I wanted to share with us a little bit about capacity assessments, but from the perspective of setting the scene and really honestly just reminding all of us at the panel this morning. Next slide, please. Next slide. And to do this, I decided that maybe a neat way is to really just focus on discussing capacity assessments from the perspective of the what, the how, and the why. And also to sort of discuss them in three key levels or three key buckets, starting all the way from the stage when there is a relationship engagement between an international organization and a local partner, or sometimes local partners and other local partners, because various organizations do conduct capacity assessments. And so I wanted to discuss a little bit around the pre-award state. And really, what is the pre-award? The pre-award assessment really just is an assessment that's around risk analysis to determine the state of readiness to receive different types of funding for the local organization. And here I would also like to give an example of the USAID NUPAS as a tool. And in terms of the how, it really is more auditory because it's really trying to understand the different systems the organization has and the state of readiness where they are. And also in the same way, also try to identify some pre-award conditions through that process that would be put in place within the context of the contract so that when the organization is working, they are aware that they do have some pre-award conditions that is stipulated contractually that they must meet to continue. And so at the end of the day, the why, what you get at the end of that is the signed award document between the partner and the donor that's giving them the resources. And so just following in the same line and sort of thinking of the logical frame is the next level is the output level of bucket, where here I wanted to use the integrated technical and organizational capacity assessment tool, which is truly the evolution of the original OCA, the organizational capacity assessment tool. And here really is at this point where the assessment is more of a participatory, in-depth reflective process between the assessor and the partner, and really it's a facilitated process. And the integrated technical and capacity assessment tool essentially just brings together organizational elements as well as technical elements that the organization focuses in achieving in its work towards achieving its mission. And so it identifies through the reflective process with the partner strengths and opportunities, and sort of leads to the why of making sure that there's a plan of action within which the partner and the organization giving its resources can work together in addressing the different elements of the capacity action within the capacity action plan, sort of as the guide for the mentorship and coaching and training and all the work that needs to happen within the organizational systems and within the organizational the whole of the organization in order to achieve the change in the internal systems and skills and policies. And this could be, in the context of networks and, whoever it is that the assessment is targeting. And then that moves us to also ask ourselves, so when all these systems and policies are in place and they are working, then what? And that's where you go on to the outcome level. And here I wanted to use the example of the Organizational Performance Index, which PACT created some years back and is used widely in the space, both donors, INGOs, and local partners as well. And this is essentially targeting the improvement. So now that the systems and the policies are improved and they're working rightly, what results are they producing for us at the performance level? And so really the part of the key elements of the Organizational Performance Index is that it's trying to, it's a standard tool. So this is one where the organization must provide evidence around scoring themselves at whatever level that they have scored themselves in terms of how they are doing. And it's a very holistic tool. And it does have 5 key domains and 2 subdomains under each of them. And also we tend to use it annually as a check-in to see how the organization is doing. And based on the different opportunities we discover, we sort of update the capacity action plan in line with it. And one of the great features of it is also enables the reporting against USAID's CBLD 9 indicator to review improvements in how the organization is performing, especially related to the CD activities it's working with. And finally, of course, there's the impact level, using impact evaluation or so many different types of evaluation. But the idea here really is that to also showcase how the capacity strengthening interventions that we do, even though focusing on the local partner systems, it does yield and contribute to the results at the bigger impact of the program. And just on top of the slide on the right-hand side, I also wanted to share that for us at PACT, we do have a capacity solutions platform, which really serves as a great platform for real-time modules, analysis, and sort of walks you through, has different tools and walks you through the whole process of assessment. And with that, I'd like to say thank you and then hand it over back to Jasper.
Yeah, thanks, Ebele, for that background. And I'd now like to share briefly also NPI EXPAND's perspective of our capacity strengthening process and the tools we use. And I'd want to say that NPI EXPAND uses a 5-step model in capacity strengthening. This model is not unique to EXPAND. It has been adopted variously by different practitioners and organizations in implementing capacity strengthening efforts. The model involves the first step of identifying local partners to work with, and the process of identifying these partners is detailed in NPI EXPAND's grant-making manual. Then the next stage is, of course, the baseline capacity assessments, and we use a combination of tools to accomplish this that I'll be discussing a bit in details in the next slides. Then planning interventions. This is really the stage of capacity strengthening planning, where we prioritize interventions collaboratively with the partners, and we prioritize needs collaboratively with partners and plan interventions, and also set capacity strengthening indicators. Then there's the stage of implementation, where we deploy different types of capacity strengthening approaches, including mentorship, trainings, collaborative learning, and others to support the organizations to overcome the needs and challenges that they've identified. And then finally, evaluating, where we look at the progress the organization has made in its capacities and how these then contribute to the attainment of results in terms of performance and sustainability. Let me now turn over to assessments, which is really the main focus of our discussion today. Next slide. So NPI EXPAND uses a combination of several different tools to implement baseline assessments. And these tools include the OCA, the Organizational Capacity Assessment, which focuses on really the organizational elements of any local partner. Then we have technical capacity assessment tools, which Ebele called earlier the TOCAs, which really focus on the technical aspects of the various services that the organizations are implementing. In NPI EXPAND, we've been able to develop and adapt various tools focusing on family planning, social marketing, social accountability, education, and COVID-19. Then we have the relational aspects, where we use the organizational network analysis tool to implement. Then the focus on performance, where we use the organizational performance index. In the spirit of collaboration, we actually borrowed these two tools, the owner and the OPI from PACT, and PACT was very supportive in allowing us to use some of its online platform, the capacity strengthening platform, to implement some of these tools. At the request of USAID, we have also implemented the NUPAS for some of our partners. Next slide. So in terms of process and in the spirit of local-led development, we use a facilitated self-assessment process for the OCA, the technical assessments, and the OPI. The methodology that PACT shared for owner is also based on a participatory approach. Implementation of the NUPAS is based on USAID's guidance on how NUPAS are implemented, where we engage third parties in this process. However, even in engaging third parties, we are very particular on the process that the third parties use in implementing the assessments, so that there's a collaborative effort between the assessor and the organism that is being assessed to go through the NUPAS. So in terms of values, next slide. And in line with the mutuality and ownership of the assessment process and results, we use a process that is participatory and partner-centered, discussion and consensus-based, and running-oriented. So that way, then we know that the local organization is at the center of guiding its own efforts in determining capacity needs and programming interventions to address these needs. That's all I want to share in terms of background. I now want to hand over to Samantha, who will introduce the panel and help us in moderating the panel discussion. Over to you, Samantha. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jasper and Abele, for those opening remarks. Now I'm excited to turn to our full panel for a roundtable discussion on their experiences. I have a few questions to facilitate a conversation, and then we'll move to questions from you, the audience. So please feel free to submitting questions via the Q&A box. At this time, I'd like to ask our remaining panelists, Jasper, Abele, all of our panelists, to turn on their cameras as I introduce you, and to keep your cameras on for the remainder of the event. So as you just heard, we have Jasper from NPI EXPAND and Abele from PACT. Next, we're pleased to welcome Samuel, the Sub-Grants Manager from Tanzania Health Promotion Support, THPS. We'd also like to welcome Mohammed Arif, Director of Programs from the National Integrated Development Association in Pakistan. And finally, we have a panelist who has not yet joined us. We're having a few technical difficulties getting him online, but we're hoping he'll be here soon. His name is Abdallah Abaid, and he's the Executive Director of the Zanzibar Fighting Against Youth Challenges organizations. So we're working hard on the side to make sure he's able to join. These panelists come from PACT partner organizations, as well as local partners supported by NPI EXPAND, and each have their own unique experiences from participating in organizational capacity assessments. So I'm thrilled to hear their perspectives. And as a reminder, please submit questions for our panelists at any time using the chat box. So to get us started, I'm going to invite our panelists from THPS and NIDA to respond to this question. The first is, which tools did you as local partners find most helpful in assessing capacity gaps and needs? And how did the assessments benefit them? Perhaps Mohammed, we can start with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Samantha. Good evening, good afternoon. This is Mohammed Arif, Director Program NIDA Pakistan. I will briefly introduce NIDA Pakistan, which is a national level organization in Pakistan. We were partnered with NPI EXPAND for the last 1.5 years, and together with them, we mainstream 6,000 out-of-school children in Pakistan. The capacity strengthening part, it was like a supplementary and added value project that we implemented together with the NPI EXPAND. We did with it assessment in mid-2022. Okay, the question that Samantha asked at which tools were most beneficial for NIDA Pakistan. So I would like to share that organizational capacity assessment and the OPI tool that were most beneficial to us. And why were they? Because the first one, the OCA, that covers various critical organizational capacity areas that actually provided us a holistic view of our strengths and weaknesses in governance, planning, financial management, administration, human resource, and program services. And then the OPI actually that links our capacities to the service delivery. That was an important part where actually we covered the domains of effectiveness, efficiency, relevance, and sustainability. These were actually practical tools that end up with prioritization of some of the key gaps where NIDA Pakistan focused in the capacity strengthening plan. I will share that what measures we have taken later on in this webinar. So the two tools, OCA and the OPI, those are most beneficial to the NIDA Pakistan context. Thank you, Samantha.
Thank you so much, Mohammed. Samuel, same question for you. What tools were most beneficial for your organization?
Thank you, Samantha. My name is Samuel Miomeke, a sub-grants manager working with the THP, with Tanzania Health Promotion Support. Actually, I'm managing the portfolio of 63 sub-grantees, which is combined of local government authorities, faith-based organization, civil society organization, and some small CSOs. But just to bring to give you just what is THPS actually. It's a local NGO established since 2011. It has been working in the game for over 10 years now. And there is a result of localization strategy born from ICAP. So we work partnership with the Ministry of Health, Ministry of Home Affairs in Tanzania. And also we're working with the local government and the President Office and the government of Tanzania. So the goal for THPS actually, it ensures to accessible high quality healthcare services to Tanzanians or through strengthening of health and the community systems for a comprehensive quality health services. And we actually work in the various interventions, including HIV, AIDS, tuberculosis, prevention of gender-based violence, mental health, non-communicable diseases, including also institutional capacity strengthening. I can mention a lot, but due to the time, I just go to mention a few. Back to the question that which actually tools did the local partners find most helpful in assessing capacity gaps and needs, and how did the assessment benefit them? Actually, for THPS, we had our own assessment, what we call the pre-award assessment, as mentioned by Amel, that is designed to measure the ability to a partner organization to manage the awards and comply with its requirements and applicable regulations. Actually, ideally, this tool is concluded whether the IP is recommended for award or not recommended. So it's a kind of a design. Also, we adopted another tool from NPI called OCA, and actually the same as it designed to measure the overall capacity of the organization. Also, it assesses the capability of 5 key areas, including governance, organizational management, program management, human resource management, as well as the financial management. Also, we adopted another tool from NPI called the TCA, which actually measures the indicator, the technical capacity indicators, and into 3 domains, including organizational strategy, supplies management, as well as management information systems. Apart from that, we, as a THPS, we have kind of organization development, so it is not actually much inclusive in the process, but it's a diagnostic tool designed to help CSCOs promote a structured and integrated assessment of the organization development. Also, we had another one, which actually not for THPS, but it is applicable in some of the Tanzania's community. We call it SAPES or maturity model. This is designed by organization called Deloitte. Actually, they use this tool to assess the maturity level of the organization. It has various dimensions, which is the maturity factors, maturity scorecard, stages, and the kind of process or areas that the organization has to go or to went through. So these are just a few, which, as we mentioned too, that actually is applicable in Tanzania, and for some are particularly for THPS as an organization. But back to the second part of the question, which is how do they actually seems to be benefit to them, to us, like for pre-award assessment is successful managing the administrative award. Also, it enables to identify potential risk, and based on those risks, define the condition, patterns, or capacity building support to be provided to mitigate such a kind of risk. And also for OCA, it serves as a learning tool as well as an assessment tool when applied as a self-assessment. Also, it enables users to identify their potentials within the organization through their approaches of self-assessment. Similarly to Mkuta that we conducted last year when we have been working with NPI, they went through on the gender audit as a result of gender operationalization, where they were able to identify internal gaps or mainstreaming or develop an action plan and assign responsible people to follow upon an implementation plan. Back to the TCA, also it serves as an input in a different process, also support interlinked decision of strategic and operational choices about the overall levels of focus area, operational modalities, as well as timing of funding mechanism. So this just a few, some of the benefits on the tool that we actually adopted as an organization. But still among those two that I mentioned, there's some of the challenges. This I can, if you allow me, I can mention a few challenges based on that tools. This tool need to customize based on the nature of the organization. Example, like THPS, we have 63 sub-grantees. Among these are local governments, FBOs, and NGOs. So you can see it's quite difficult to conduct a peer-award assessment to local government, local government authorities, and ask about the internal control as a kind of indicators in the tool. Or you ask the issue of control or governance. Likewise, you won't include your your tool indicators to homosexual in case you are doing assessment of a faith-based organization. So these are a few challenges among the few challenges. Also, in addition to that, the assessment of technical capacity assessment to local government authorities may sometimes come with the results, but those gaps that you found during the assessment can be differ with the government priorities. So it can be difficult to implement them because already they differs with the government authorities. Also, there is sometimes.
Absolutely. Samuel, I don't mean to cut you off, but you're actually touching on the exact subject I want to ask about next. Okay. So thank you so much for that response. You were touching on challenges, though, and that's exactly where we'd like to go from here. Specifically, what challenges you have all encountered during the capacity assessment process, and how do we ensure that the assessments are valuable and effective? Perhaps I'll start with Jasper and Abele. I would like to get your perspective as implementing partners first.
Yeah, thanks, Samantha. There are quite a number of challenges in the organizational assessments. I'll share two and let the other panelists also share what their experiences are. One of the key ones is, prioritizing, the capacity needs to focus on, while at the same time balancing between, the interest of the organization and the interest of the project, like NPI EXPAND. being self-assessments, there's no guarantee that what the organization will consider as priority is what a project like NPI EXPAND, given the focus on both service delivery and capacity strengthening, will consider as priority. And for this reason, one of the ways, or some of the, things we have done to ensure then that we're able to balance between the two perspectives, first, of course, is to agree on a prioritization criteria, with the organization that we are implementing the assessment for, and looking at the various needs that come on the table and clustering them based on the given capacities, so that way, then when we are prioritizing, we don't miss out any of the categories that is critical to the organization, including what skills to be strengthened, what systems to be strengthened, what strategies need to be developed, what relationships need to be, developed or sustained. The other tip that we implement to help us overcome this challenge is asking organizations to, tap into other sources of support, especially for those things that are important to them based on what their interests are and that are outside the scope of our project to implement. So that way then, what our role becomes is not necessarily providing resources to these organizations to implement or tackle those challenges, but mentoring them, to tap in those other sources for support. Also reminding them through the discussion, given this discussion-oriented process, reminding them that we have a common interest in ensuring that the organization is more effective in implementing its respective missions, and that they're doing that in an efficient way. So not losing that sight, so that even if our project is focused, for instance, on family planning as a technical area, given the organization has family planning as one of its focus areas in its strategic plan, that somehow is contributing to achieving those results in the end of the day. The second challenge I'd want to share is, use of most of our assessment tools are based on rating, self-rating. Using self-rating or changing scores or self-rating to determine changing capacity is a challenge, because self-assessments are very subjective in nature and bring serious issues of reliability and validity of the data that we collect. So what we've done, the innovation we've done in NPI EXPAND, while initially we are designed to use this, the change or the comparison of scores between baseline and subsequent assessments to determine changing capacity, what we did midway through the program is adopt an approach where we, as part of the planning at the baseline, we identify capacity strengthening indicators that we support the organization then to monitor over time to determine changing capacity. Thank you. I'll probably hand over to Ebele.
Yeah, no, thank you so much, Jasper, and thank you, Samantha. So let me add to what Jasper has shared based on the experience, 3 other areas where over the years we've experienced challenges. I think the first one is competing priorities. The reality is that usually when you want to work with local organizations, and it's usually based on a project, right? It's a program like NPI EXPAND, right? Where that's how the relationship starts. And so part of the challenges for us as international partners is that the organization has its own priorities and it has so much that it's doing as a whole organization. And so making the time to actually spend in doing the assessments, because some of our assessments, depending on which one you're using, the process is sometimes is 2 days, sometimes 3 days, depending on how you're doing the assessment. So I think that, that's one place where there's usually a challenge. But I think, the solution to that, I think I have found over the years, is making sure that you're using participatory approaches. To be honest, the best practice would even be to design or validate the tool with the local partner so that they sort of already understand the pieces that put it together and might even be excited and looking forward to the assessment itself, at least at the output level. I do also recognize that in terms of the pre-award level, that is an assessment that the INGO needs to do to be able to determine the risk level, as I shared earlier on. And also, so I think if the local partner can see why this beyond the project and see it for the organizational mission, then that's how you can win. And of course, that breeds ownership. The second one is related to something that Jasper shared, and it's interesting to hear how NPI EXPAND decided to be innovative around getting around it. And that's the score. But I wanted to talk about the score from the perspective of removing the focus on the number and really thinking about what that number means. I think half of the time, and I mean, as all of us, everybody wants to score high. Everybody wants to do good because that's, that means you're doing well when you score high. And I think also that, fits into today's discussion around balancing this rigor that you're using to get this specific score and what that score means. And remembering that at least at the output level, the whole point of this assessment is to truly understand what exists and what must change for the program to run smoothly. And so I think that if we can focus more on the progress being made, I know a lot of times when we work with local partners, they want their OPI scores to be the perfect number 4. And then, in fact, the first time they might have the perfect number 4 because they say they have everything intact. And then by the time they start to do the project and the relationship evolves over time, the mentorship and the coaching and the different training, then they realize, oh, actually, maybe we're not really at that 4. So I think if we can take our minds away from thinking of numbers and thinking of, moving up that number and really think about the essence of it and what it really brings it to, I think that would be very super helpful. And then I think the third one that I will share before I give it back to you, Sam, is that assessment fatigue is real. And, as INGOs, we are, so many of us, millions of partners that we've assessed over time. But assessment fatigue from the perspective of the local partner is really real. And I think as anyone who supports organizations, I think we can do a better job of learning from and learning from what exists and leveraging what already exists. So if NPI EXPAND has already worked with with one of our partners, right, like Zafaikov, who is not here right now, and has actually determined a baseline around, then why would PACT come and decide to do yet another assessment to determine again where they are? It becomes very cumbersome, and it's really just takes much more time. I think that if we can learn as INGOs to leverage and learn from and collaborate a bit more in sharing. But I think also local partners are also part of it, because again, experience has shown that local partners also don't necessarily, they're not ready to raising their hands to give you what the assessments that they have done. I mean, I've worked with some that we've even asked, do you have an assessment the past year? They say yes. And then you say, oh, what kind of assessment it is it? Then they tell you what it is. And it's okay, so can we see what you did? And they're usually not ready to show it up, because maybe, regardless of what the score is. So I think if we can all realize that the way to address assessment fatigue is to tell ourselves that if a partner has been assessed in the past 1 year, please, by all means, utilize the content. And you, local partner, please, by all means, share so that they can be additional instead of starting again from the scratch and putting you through the same process that another organization has put you through, especially if the assessment we're talking about is organizational and technical and is holistic. You can also even share, and then the person can then adapt the new tool to focus on only areas that are important and are needed and have not already been addressed. So with that, I think I will hand it back to you, Samantha.
Thank you, Abeli and Jasper. I saw quite a few thumbs up and hearts while you were both speaking, so I think our audience certainly agrees with the points you were making. I'd like to turn to our panelists from THPS and NIDA to get your perspectives as well on challenges you encountered during your capacity assessment process, and how you would ensure that the assessments are valuable and effective. Perhaps we can start with Mohammed.
Thank you, Samantha. Well, one of the challenges that Jasper has touched upon, that initially, we went up with an ambitious capacity strengthening plan. We thought that there are resources behind it and we could, implement everything. But then we come to know that no, we don't have that much resources specifically from the NPI EXPAND, and at that moment we don't have any other donors around. So that was one of the challenge that we end up with an ambitious plan, and then finally we prioritized things and shrink it to a level that which can be implemented. So that was the kind of mitigation measures to that. Then the second challenge that we faced was, yes, we went through self-assessment. It was quite a good approach that organization has to assess themselves. But looking into, the technical terminologies and the technical aspect of those assessment tools, in my view, there should be some technical support from the NPI EXPAND. We have been through the same exercise with another donor, and they actually engage subject matter expert on every section. So beside the self-assessment tool, they also give us, like kind of mentoring support to assess and to evaluate those findings. So I wish that would have been, intact in this process. Then another one was the challenge that this process started a bit late. Like we implemented the program with the NPI EXPAND, so we wish that it would have, from the very beginning, so that we have that support from the NPI EXPAND team as well, and also we can, align those priorities with our organizational goals and with our own resources. But that end up, the process was started a bit late. So those are some of the challenges that we faced in Pakistan.
Thank you so much, Mohammed, for that perspective. Samuel, anything you would like to add as well? I know you started to speak on this in your last response.
Yeah, but as I was trying to explain before, the challenge on the tool that we are using, we come close to the technical capacity assessment where we, as a THPS, we had our own during the project light design. We intended to do intervention in the family planning, but when it comes to the presentation to the NPI, it seems it was not part of the priorities. So we had to switch on and to go based on what actually they proposed us to do. And back also from Kuta, we conducted an OCA, organization assessment to them. They they realized a lot of priorities which actually they wanted to be implemented. And also, they have their own their priority in their strategic plan, which to them was fitting into the peak time, and as well as to the fortunately, to us, it was more specific on the system strengthening and organization strengthening, which actually we had to delete majority of their priorities and to go with what we have based on the resources that we had by that particular time. Also, another more challenge that I think I can just say generally for the NPI tools that we had, I think they're missing something of maturity. Yes, we are focusing on doing kind of assessments, but I never seen if there's a kind of tool that is looking for the maturity of organization. Like now, as a THPS, we already conducted the kind of OCA TCA. Yes, we are trying to operationalize some of the agenda on gender issues, on communication. But how do they come up to realize how are we grown to that point where we have been before and now the right position, the position that we are right now? So it's something that and I think they should have to think about that and find a way how we can improve our tool to come up with to address those kind of challenges. Over to you, Samantha. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Samuel, and it's great that we can see your face now. It's great to see you. We have quite a number of questions from the audience that I would like to get to next. The next question I'm going to direct to Jasper and Abele, and it's on a topic that Mohammed actually just touched on, about the timing of conducting an assessment. So Jasper and Abele, what in your experience, is the ideal time to conduct a capacity assessment with local partners? Is it after grants are kicked off, or should it be done at the time of local partner selection for other programmatic interventions? Over to you for your thoughts on that.
I'll go first on this one, then I'll hand it over to Jasper. So now we're talking about capacity assessments generally, right? You know, we talked about the pre-award level, and then we talked about the output level. So it depends on the level you're talking about. So if we're talking about the New Pact has their own, we call it the SARA, and other organizations have others. That is actually determining the risk level for the agreement you're getting into between the international organization and the local organization. So that you need to do immediately, right? Even before, so that you can then set forth the pre-award conditions, which, by the way, you could also push into the capacity action plan that you develop at the end of the more robust, holistic, participatory, facilitated, integrated technical capacity and organizational capacity assessment. Now, the when of that one also, from my experience, ideally, you want to do that too at the beginning. So, you know, the first 3 months where the contract is signed and now you're doing all the startup stuff, it would be ideal to be able to do the assessment at that time and come up with an action plan so that as you are implemented the technical pieces, you are also working to address some of the organizational pieces that might exist, as well as some of the technical pieces where if there are gaps there that also exist. And you know, at least the way PACT facilitates ITOCAs, to be honest, even at the point of facilitation, the administration and of the tool itself, there's already capacity strengthening taking place because it's done in such a way that there's a cross-section of the organization discussing their organizational health and thinking about how that health that they have is sort of leading them forward towards achieving their mission, which is who they are. So I would, you know, so I would say pre-award, it has to happen before you get the grant because it's part of what it's part of the details that you put in there. Then I say, you know, as a TOCA level, you also want to make sure that you do that as early as the inception stage so that you can also determine a work plan and align it to your bigger picture work plan as well as you do the work. Over to you, Jasper.
Thanks, Ebele. And from the NPI EXPAND perspective, given the, you know, the model that I shared earlier that we use in the process, it's preferable to conduct assessments immediately once we have, you know, done the scoping of local partners and identified the partners we want to work with, and moving the second stage then of implementing the assessments. But these assessments preferably should be implemented before we design the grants for the service delivery bit of the project, and also discuss the investments in strengthening the capacities of the organization. This way, then, we move forward in an integrated manner, you know, in looking at the activities that the organization is implementing to deliver services, and now that can be strengthened so that they can achieve better results by strengthening specific capacities in the organization. So that timing, I think, if it worked perfectly well with most of our organizations, probably would be the best. But I mean, contexts vary, and I've seen some of the assessments coming much later, and then necessitating us to go back and issue maybe second sub-awards that are addressing capacity strengthening, or defining other mechanisms through which we can, you know, program capacity strengthening support to these organizations. Thank you.
Thank you, Jasper and Ebele. For the next question, I want to direct this first to our local panelists that are on the call for THPS and NIDA. And this question is about trust. And have you experienced any issues of trust among local organizations, with implementing partners, maybe with other organizations you've participated, who have participated in capacity assessments? And how have you handled these issues of trust? Maybe we can start with Mohammed from NIDA. You're on mute, Mohammed.
Sorry.
No problem.
Okay. Well, for NIDA Pakistan, since it's a self-assessment, so mostly the trust goes to the implementing organizations, like who are assessing themselves. So in my view, we trust the findings. Yes, it may be a little bit exaggerated if we go to the different sections like the OPI tools, where everybody wants to be ranked at 4, so that it gives a better reflection of the organization performance, which needs to be counter check on the mentor side, from the assessor side. And the findings, since it's our own findings, so I guess there is no trust deficit, at least from the partner side.
Thanks, Mohammed. Thank you. Samuel, any thoughts from you?
Thank you, Samantha. Actually, from the experience of doing this kind of assessment, is true. The issue of trust is it normally comes to during the process. Normally, on the based on my experience, whatever assessment being conducted on an organization, whether the motive is for them to get fund or whatever, they normally be defensive. So the question is, why do they become defensive? Because they are not trusting the one who is assessing, probably, and assuming that they will lose the opportunity of getting a award or whatever. Take an example for pre-award assessment. Sometimes we go to do a pre-award assessment, the CSO are more defensive, and they hide some of the information. So doing so, it means that they're lacking trust for the whoever going there to do a kind of assessment. So that's a simple example. Also, even to us, sometimes when we have been we've been starting to do, that meaning the NPI starting to conduct an OCA to us, there was some, we are not sure what do they exactly want us to disclose, and what will impact the organization reputation. So the issue that we think the process itself, of assessment is actually must have go hand to hand with the kind of the issues of trust. So it depends with the understanding of the partners who is being assessed, and how is aware of the process, and how can be corporate, and how you yourself, the one who conduct the assessment, you engage effectively the assessee. That can either determine can determine how you come up with the result and forego the issue of trust. So that's my view. Over to you.
Thank you, Samuel. Abeli and Jasper, I'd also like to give you both an opportunity to respond to that question.
Yeah, I think the issue of trust is very key in the success of these assessments. And thankfully, at least for us as EXPAND and PACT, we are very particular about implementing a process that reinforces and builds this trust through the process. Being conscious about any, discomforts right at the beginning, ensuring that you address these even before you go into the assessment process itself. There are instances where we've had to delay an assessment process just to try and ease that tension before we get into that. So I think that is very key. So implementing a truly participatory process, not token sim, participatory, but truly participatory, I think is very critical in achieving good assessment results. Thank you.
Thank you, Jasper.
I mean, I think the panelists have done a great job with addressing this, and I think one thing I would just say is that we just need to remember that capacity strengthening assessments are very intrusive. And if you come at it recognizing that it's intrusive, and if you want to get it intrusive with an organization, then it means that you too need to be at the same level where you are also completely transparent about what the assessment is, when it is happening, what is being used for, and and more importantly, how It's, whatever the results are, whatever the interventions are, is going to link into their organizational mission. Because remember, it's not about it's not about whoever you are, whether you're a local partner, sub-granting, or an international partners. It's not about you. It's about the organization's own growth in its own journey towards sustainable development. So I think if that understanding is clear, it would help to break down the barriers around, what do they want from me? What should I show them? What should I not show them? Just recognizing that capacity strengthening is very intrusive, is very critical with trust.
Thank you, Abele. Thanks everybody for those responses. I'm going to go to another question from the audience, and this is related to USAID's local capacity strengthening policy, which I know all of our panelists are familiar with. The question is, how do you integrate the need to improve organizational performance, as mentioned in that policy, when conducting capacity needs assessments and developing capacity strengthening plans? Jasper, perhaps I can start with you for this question.
Yeah, what we have tried, first I want to start with a statement that I find very valuable for everyone, that capacity is a form of potential that is demonstrated through improved performance. But achieving this improved performance within the time scale of most of our projects is actually limited. So what we've done is, in applying our assessment tools, and thankfully we got to use the OPI from PACT in addition to the other tools that we are using. We are linking those two levels of assessments. What the inputs are. These are the various capacities in terms of skills and abilities of people in an organization, systems, structures, strategies, and now that strengthening those will enable an organization to become better, become more sustainable, more effective, more efficient, in its operations. So the link between the two is critical. And one other innovation we introduced is identifying the CS indicators, the capacity strengthening indicators, and trying to formulate a hypothesis on how this will strengthen the achievement of better performance for the organizations, and ensuring that the organization then understand this, and all of us are collaborating to work towards that. Thank you.
Thank you, Jasper.
Yeah.
Abele, anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, let me just add one thing, though this is a very complete question that requires some in-depth analysis, but I would just say that, in the context of the local capacity strengthening policy, USAID's policy, I think that, in discussions around performance and why that is important, it's really just making sure that we move ourselves away from this idea of providing tokenistic level of capacity strengthening, and really just thinking more deeply around how is it that what it is we're providing is linking and giving us results at a higher level than number of people we trained, right? It's trying to get us to think that all that we are doing from the inputs and the outputs, it just needs to make sure that it's translating to change, to demonstrable, noticeable change from external. With the OPI for PACT, we look at it from the perspective of, so you have all these changes that have happened as a result of all these interventions that someone has done in the context of capacity strengthening. Then what? And that then what is not defined alone by what you say, right? That's why it's a global tool that has standards around it. There's efficiency, effectiveness, sustainability, relevance, and resilience, right, as big components of it. So it's measuring it and saying externally, like relevance, right? From the external perspective, how is it that you are being perceived in terms of your performance? And it's no longer just about the project, but it's now about the organization itself and how you're moving forward. So I would say that, that's I think USAID in that policy is trying to make sure that they're helping us to think the more holistically and take a bigger picture view when we do capacity strengthening interventions, and to really just consider what shows up at the performance level.
Thank you, Abele and Jasper. I want to move to a question for, again, our local panelists from THPS and NIDA on ownership. So earlier in the webinar, Abele spoke a little bit about competing priorities and the importance of designing and validating a capacity assessment tool with the local partner. So Mohammed and Samuel, what measures were taken to ensure that your organization owned the assessment findings and the capacity strengthening plans? And what measures have been successful to ensure this ownership? Samuel, maybe we can start with you for this one.
Thank you, Samantha. Actually, on the question that what measures were taken to ensure the organization own the assessment findings and the capacity stronger than actually, I just go straight that first in order to get the ownership of this assessment, you should have to identify the project lead activity within the organization to manage and monitor the capacity strengthening portfolio and be accountable for the overall process. Also, you should engage the employees to clearly understand the tools and the indicators before assessment. Also, you should encourage them to be part of the process through deep diving in the discussing their internal issues to ensure they realize their gaps and suggest a mitigation plan. Also, we should allow them to change whatever preset indicators based on their needs without diverting the core objective. Also, we should have to facilitate them to conduct their post-safe assessment during intervention or after completion of capacity strengthening based on the priorities, and allow them to change whatever is deemed realized irrelevant of their end. So this also actually done we applied this approach to Mkuta when we are conducting this kind of intervention in capacity strengthening intervention to them, and we see the result. For really, we think that can be meaningful to them to us to adopt this kind of approach and the kind of ways to make the ownership of the process. Thank you.
Thank you, Samuel. Mohammed, same question for you.
Okay. Well, for NIDA Pakistan, since it was a participatory self-assessment process, so the ownership was from the very beginning, because senior management team, the board of directors, all were engaged in the process. So the CSP plan, which was developed at the end of the process, was duly approved from them. Then some of the gaps, like those were identified, have been, practically taken, like measures have been taken. The strategic plan, which was like one of the key findings, that NIDA plan was outdated, so we focus on that. We also focus on the institutional arrangements, to ensure that international standards and other humanitarian standards which were lacking were applied. Then some of the gaps were in our systems, like the communication strategy, the sectoral specific strategy, MIS system. So all those measures which were identified and actions have been taken by NIDA team. Then the USAID funding policies, which was like lacking at organizational level. So we received a number of trainings from the Momentum and also from the NPI EXPAND colleagues. So the capacity of the staff has been strengthened on those points. So those are some of the measures that has already been taken against the CSP plan. Thank you.
Thank you both for those responses. I'm going to go back to one of the questions from the audience, and Jasper and Abele, I'll start with you for this question. So one of the problems for the capacity strengthening assessments that this attendee noted is that the assessments or the evaluations are carried out, but then the organization may not have the human resources or financial resources to then implement the capacity strengthening plans or address the gaps identified throughout the assessment. So how do you navigate when that happens, and how can you still support organizations based on the capacity assessment that was conducted?
Yeah, given most of the assessment efforts most of the capacity strengthening efforts that we implement are based on various projects, and projects have their own limitations. We also limited on then what we can be able to take. So the assessment comes up with issues that are beyond the scope of the project. But as a project, at least we can be able to identify those ones that we can be able to support through the project. And then, of course, clarify what we are not able to support with the organization, so that then they are aware on what limitations we have as a project. But one thing I've found valuable is going beyond that and supporting the organization, start looking for other sources of support. The organizations, for instance, that are applying for, funding, opportunities from other sources, and helping them to integrate, supporting capacity strengthening efforts through those applications. And we've gotten a few cases where, and I think NIDA has also shared one of such an example, where we've had other funders using the results of these assessments to support these organizations. The other organizations that have resources internally that they can support specific efforts, encouraging them to identify what is it that they need and can be able to address internally using their own resources, so that then we don't have to, we can, redirect the support to other areas that they are not able to support. I think those efforts try to mitigate this challenge, but I'd say it's a huge challenge given the resource limitations of most of the local organizations. Thank you.
Yeah, it is a huge challenge indeed. And I'm not sure that we can claim in this panel that we can provide the solution to it. However, we can definitely share some of our thoughts and experience. So from the PAC perspective, I will share a little bit about, just in line with what Jasper has shared. We, over the years, actually, just during COVID and then after COVID, one of the things that we came out of as an organization was we developed what we call the Business Sustainability Planning Toolkit. And essentially, we were thinking during COVID that everyone had to sort of stay home and, those of interruptions, right? How were local partners actually prepared for that time when we had all those disruptions? And so we realized that quite a number of our partners had to really spend some time thinking about the business sustainability for their organizations. And but the toolkit we have includes specific modules on resource mobilization that Jasper spoken about, but not just resource mobilization, but thinking about it from the different dynamics, right? There's income generation activities that could be part of what a local partner wants to do. There is also private sector funding that they could also explore. What do they need to do? How do they need to be ready? And then of course there's the bigger donor, USAID, DFID, all the others. And also, how do they need to prepare for that? What's the process? And how can they be abreast of those types of opportunities because part of the challenge also is that, local partners don't tend to know half as much about the opportunities. And I'm so glad and grateful for the Working with USAID website, which is now trying to draw more attention and provide more information for local partners to participate more meaningfully in the process. But I think that, just looking for funding is not looking for funding, but it's really more or less capacity to be able to do that. And the question also talks about when there are not many people. And I think that's a very key one. And that will link to my second point, which is that I think if capacity strengthening can be taken as a holistic approach, an all organization-wide effort, right? Which means that starting from the board of directors, everybody is aware and is planning around how this organization's growth towards its mission must continue. I think it's an important and critical part because that's what will enable management and leadership to be able to think through how they are allocating resources within the organization, the limited resources that they have within the organization. And I link it again back to Jasper's point, but also generally, even with everyone else on the panel. If you think about it, when you've provided capacity, or rather, when capacity has been strengthened because it's not really provided, if you're taking an asset-based approach, which the LCS encourages us to do, and which we do as a way of practice, really, once there's new capacity, ideally there should be a resultant effect of that new capacity yielding some results, even at the resource mobilization level. It's unfortunate that one of our partners, Mzafaiko, was not able to join, but he also would have shared how after the assessments, after they've developed their plan, and after they've started addressing their plan as a whole organization, starting from the board, making it a priority, and sending the right people within the limited people in the organization to get the right training, and making sure that there's accountability around the training they received and what they would use it to do. And then they started to even become more popular, even among INGOs, looking out for who to work with. Because as INGOs, well, whenever you have a new project, you're always looking out for who's available and who's there. So it also situates and positions them for that type of availability for being able to take on new funding. But I think that taking on new funding should be connected to what the organizational growth plan is, so that you don't end up sort of snuffing life out of the local partner by just taking funding for the sake of taking funding and for the sake of having more people in the organization. You want to make sure that it's aligned to the mission of that organization and where it wants to go.
Thank you, Abele. You were getting some claps there as you were speaking, so our audience certainly agrees. For the next question, I would like to go to Samuel and Mohammed. So the title of this webinar is, of course, about balancing rigor and ownership. So from your experience, what should we do to balance this need for conducting a rigorous assessment with the need for also ownership and minimizing assessment fatigue, which you've spoken about? Samuel, perhaps we can begin with you for this question.
Thank you, Samantha. I think, in my view, we should balance the two. Actually, as far as now, we have looked on the different tools that we have been using to work on the kind of assessment. And when it comes to the issue of rigor assessment and the kind of the ownership, I think we should. I would suggest it to work on the localization, as now, as we've seen that based on the localization strategy of USA that has been given out, it insists the organization to work together and to work things to share some of the experience and other in the learning platform. So I think for us, it may be the way that can encourage the ownership for this assessment if you apply that kind of local to local sharing experience. As we are doing us and Mkuta, it's a local organization. Both were local organization, but the one is actually been in the game for so long, and the other is actually growing to thriving to the peak. So I think we trying to use our local tools to ensure that they are adopted and actually they work on their own. So I think I can suggest that way. Probably my fellow can add on that.
Yeah, Simul, I agree with you that if we want to take it to the next level, so localization is the better option there. If the local partners like NIDA Pakistan and THSP, they are now trained, so they should be given the chance, to train other local partners with a little support from the NPI EXPAND. Then the other, which I mentioned in the beginning, that the timing of the assessment, that is very important, because if we start it in an early stage, so we will finish it at least timely and with active support from both sides, also from the partner side, that they will be actively engaged, and then the NPI EXPAND team, they will be there to support the partners. Then there should be also some technical and financial support, at least for some of the sections of the CSP, capacity strengthening plans, so that both NPI EXPAND and the partner ensure that some of the action which has been prioritized, like the top 3, the top 1, those are implemented within that duration. That will give ownership to the partner, and also to the NPI EXPAND team, that yes, it's workable and it worked. Then the third one that I mentioned, that yes, we have developed the CSP plan, but to implement it, the local partners at least needs further support, which I quoted one of the example, that with another donor, NIDA Pakistan, has materialized this, that we got a subject matter expert on those prioritized sections. So their support was there till implementation of those priorities. And in the implementation, those subject matter expert help NIDA that yes, you can implement those sections through this way. Otherwise, the CSP plan alone is not sufficient, in my view. So these are some of the things which will give ownership to the partners and also ensure its true implementation. Thank you.
Thank you both. Jasper Abele, I want to see if you have anything to add before moving to the next question on this balancing act.
Yeah, 2 additional ideas I can share. One, of course, is ensuring top leadership ownership, and involvement in the process. In many of the assessments, some of us make mistakes to, overlook the board because they're really not involved in the day-to-day running of the organization. But those are very important. Those are very important structure in the organization in terms of allocation of resources, in terms of supporting and capacity strengthening efforts internally. So ensuring that you introduce the process early enough, ensure that they understand the process and they're engaged in it. In fact, one of the tools, the OCA tool, has one of the sections that focuses on governance, and that's really the role of the board. So ensuring that in the discussion about governance, you are involving the board in doing that self-reflection. A well-implemented assessment process is also a platform for learning, cross-learning among the participants, stakeholders within the organization, and also with the facilitator, so that any opportunity that you identify that people need to share information about their understanding of specific, capacities and performance standards within the organization, please create those opportunities. Not many people in the organization understand, for instance, aspects in finance management. So if the finance manager is there and people are struggling to understand a specific aspect on that, give them the opportunity to educate the other staff about that. As a facilitator, you also come, with some background of probably more enhanced understanding of the various functions. That, of course, is using industry standards, to inform, the measures, to inform the assessment in the organization, so that then, even when they have scored high or perceive themselves as having high capacity in specific areas, let them be aware of what the standard is and what it says. Yes, here you see yourself as having performed this much, but look at what the industry standard is and what we need to work towards. Those are the ideas I'd want to share. Ebele.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. I think you guys have quite covered a lot of it. One thing I just want to add is that I think when I really think about the idea of balancing that rigor with ownership, I think it's just about us making sure that as we work with ourselves, first of all, that we're really working in true partnership. with the local partners, right? It's not, let local partners not see you as the person who's coming to assess them, and that's like really so what it is. But there should be like a real partnership, true partnership. And then I'll just say that again, just also remember as an ING or the assessor or the person who's leading the assessment, that no matter how rigorous and how perfect the numbers are, they are numbers. And we're working with human beings and people, and we're thinking to elicit, facilitate, foster change. And there's no way you can catalyze that change without grounding that rigor in ownership. So I think if we also come at it recognizing that we're working in partnership, true partnership, and we're working together, and we're all chasing towards the same thing in a very transparent, trust-driven way with the local partners. It's important because regardless of how perfect a number is still a number. And regardless of how rigorous we say assessment is, if that assessment result does not yield to change, then it really isn't that rigorous after all. Thanks,
Thank
Martha.
you so much. Thank you, Abele. We have time for just a couple more questions. I'm going to go back to Samuel and Mohammed for this one. What strengths or perhaps weaknesses of your organization do you feel are often missed during assessments? And how can we make sure that we're not missing any strengths or weaknesses? Mohammed, perhaps we can start with you.
Well, the most important one, in my view, it's the available resources with local partners. It is often missed, in the assessment process, because the local partners, they, pretend that they want to achieve the higher results. And on the other hand, the donor, they also want it, yes, we want to assess that what are the gaps so that we can focus on. But without realizing the available resources, both with the partner and with the donor, the end result, it will be a little bit, in my view, it will be jeopardized. And its actual implementation will be limited, So that's one of the key aspects that should be, assessed. That do we have the resources to implement those measures identified as gaps, as strengths identified in the assessment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mohammed. Samuel, over to you.
Thank you. Actually, in my view, I think that during the assessment, we realized that some of the organizations, they are not actually realizing their internal potentials. I mean, the human resource that they are in the in-house that can be using, they can either use them to conduct this kind of assessment and to ensure that they are supporting the organization. So they are looking on the external, on that their mindset to look on the external, but in reality, there is an internal resource that can be more effective than using externalities. Also, majority of them, the agenda of capacity strengthening is not actually in their strategic plan. Majority of organizations look on the resource mobilization and the other agenda based on the market situation. So they are not actually taking this part as among to be included in their strategic plan, whether it's long-term or short-term strategic plans. Also, apart from that, I think they should, there are issues of sharing local sharing experience platform. I think it's more effective for the organization, because these tools are designed, you're tailored based on the environment. So if these organizations, they will customize their tools to fit on the environment, on the situation, I think they'll be more useful compared to those actually have been adopted, whatever the designs or bring in the learning platform. So final, I think the most crucial, opportunity or kind of strength, they can either engaging the board of directors in the process, because are the ones who are making decision. So once they are aware of this kind of intervention or strengthening capacity, I think it will be easy to cascade down to the lower levels. That's really going to be more effective. Thank you.
Thank you both. Jasper and Abele, anything you would like to add before we close out for the day?
I think depending on the skill of the facilitator, and a facilitator in this process is very, very, very critical. I think there's the danger of focusing on the more, output-oriented short-term aspects of this capacity strengthening, so that then you leave out the more strategic focus. For instance, the focus of some assessments I've seen, some assessment reports I've seen, is what skills or abilities staff have, what systems, what tools are available, as opposed to how is the implementation, how is the utilization of these tools to enhance efficiency, how is the organization sustaining these efforts, what culture is there for continued learning and improvement within the organization. So in most assessments I've seen, there's that aspect that is missed that is very important to an organization, and particularly for those organizations that are mature, whose focus should be how do we take this organization to the next level. Thanks.
One thing to just add is, just also treat it as a learning process. Like it can be one size fits all. You can't use the same capacity assessment for a nascent organization with the same numbers of indicators and the same as you're using for a more mature organization, which is already receiving USAID resources. So just to put that at that. Thanks.
Thank you, Abele. Jasper, shall I pass it to you to close us out for the day?
Yes, thank you, Samantha. And we are now come to the end of our webinar. I sincerely thank all of you for your participation. We extend our gratitude to the panelists for such a wonderful discussion. Today's webinar is just the second in our series of webinars throughout this year. Please be on the lookout for the third webinar. It should be another very exciting discussion that we have planned for you. Also sign up, look at the chat box and sign up for email notifications from NPI EXPAND. And also visit our social media pages and our website for more updates about NPI EXPAND. Thank you all, and have a good rest of your day.